Let's see. Okay. We're streaming to the internet. Welcome, everyone. I'm a bit overwhelmed by all the people. It has been 5 years, I think, since last time we were in London, in a much smaller room with much fewer people. And it's awesome to get back here and see all of you. We have a pretty packed program today, but like also stellar talks. That this is a lot of learnings and inspiration. And we're not doing any Q&A, so you have to actually speak to them after the fact. But yeah, restrooms or restroom. Open door. Left, not the elevator, not the emergency stairs, but the door that's left. Yeah. Yeah.
It's full in floor 5, floor 1.
Yeah. All right.
Then fire escape is through there.
Yeah, there's fire escapes, there's green signage. This is only for people here, not for people watching YouTube, by the way. Sorry. Yeah, okay. But yeah, thanks Codehouse for hosting us. Fantastic. Hope you have grabbed sushi and drinks. Feel free to grab drinks after the talks. There's a little like a bit of chair game. So in between the talks, if you feel like standing, that's great. The people sitting out, good. But yeah, there's also like benches. You can also sit on the floor, like in this own style. But yeah, I shouldn't be talking because we have like, as I mentioned, packed program. I should give the mic over to my colleague Simeon. You might know from the internet. But yeah, and I will get back to the production. But yeah, thank you again for coming. Yeah, Simeon.
Thank you, Knut. Yes, I'm the internet Simeon Briggs. We've got a bunch of great speakers. Thanks for the one person not laugh. We've got a bunch of great talks. I'm just going to run through the names. So, Yusuf is going to be speaking tonight. Jono from Roboto Studios. Evelina as well. And we've got a talk from Toby at Even Seats. And then I'll be closing out with a talk as well. So I don't want to hog the stage too much tonight. And I just want to get straight into the first one. So I'd like to come forward and we'll get set up. There we go. Actually, while this is getting set up, it's interesting. You've got a migration to WordPress. No migration to WordPress. Migration to headless. Migration from WordPress. Got my mind at the moment actually as well. It's the next course. I run the learning program at Sanity, and it's the next course that I'm currently actively writing. My head's there because I'm literally writing a big migration script from WordPress. So if there's learnings to come out of that, we'd love to hear what's happening there. If you have struggled to migrate into a headless framework, I'd love to hear what the challenges are there. There's so many different data sources to come from with legacy systems, and it is a challenge. So yeah, just trying to gather as much information on that as we can. That's my pitch for what I'm working on next. And I'm going to hand over to Arm now.
Hey everyone, and I'm a software engineer. I run my own company, Space and Tabs. I do web and mobile development. And I'm here today to mainly tell you a story about how we shipped Women Tech SEO, the website for them. There is a lot to unpack in the story, so I am going to focus on the basics here. So it's mainly going to be a story about how to get the basics right and how getting these basics right gets you a lot of the way there. So Women Tech SEO had an old website. I also built it for them. The founder of the community is my wife, Arish, so I'm her tech guy. And the old website, as you see at the top here, the new website is down here. And when you look at it, you might not see like it's just a UI uplift. There isn't really much happening, but actually under the hood, a lot of it has changed to support this new thing we built. Just a bit of context. So the old website was basically a weekend project. We sat down together in a couple of days, got a template using Gatsby. Template is mainly a blog, so it had an about page, maybe a small blog, and we used it mainly to showcase some of the local meetup events that was happening at the time, and that was when the community is small scale. Right now, the community is much more than that. So we have different pages, such as the directory pages, which is a speakers hub, founders hub. So it had some interactivity, such as search and filtering and things like that. We added a whole lot more than blogs. So you have different type of blogs, different type of content, different type of conference. So when we had a look and decided to uplift the UI of the website, we also had a look at what we're using in terms of the content management and how our content modeling was doing, and the tech we're using to build the website. So a good question is, why start a rebuild? It looks like a fairly simple UI uplift, so why go through the process of doing all that and building it from scratch? Well, on the content side, the first thing is our content model wasn't really flexible. So we had all these pages, and every page had its own, what you can think of if you use Sanity, like a schema. So you had a conference schema, a blog post schema, a knowledge hub schema. All of them are almost the same, and we are just changing a bunch of fields here and there. So it's not ideal. It created a lot of duplication, and obviously something that's built in a weekend and then evolved really rapidly, it caused a lot of headaches. And soon enough, Gatsby stopped developing as well. So it was great when we started, but we're using static site generation. So the more pages we add, the slower it got. And obviously, once Netlify acquired it, things got a bit stale. So it wasn't moving or evolving. And the final nail in the coffin was content. It got really expensive. So we're in the free plan. It was working for us until they limited the content model, how many content models you need, and suddenly we were exceeding that limit and looking at a $300 bill per month, which is really quite expensive. So we really, like, it's not contentful fault, but we really needed to rethink how we model our content. So I'll talk a little bit about how we planned the migration. First thing is we looked at the templates we had. A lot of it was actually duplicated pieces and duplicated structures everywhere. So let's say, for example, you had a podcast and you had a blog. Both of them had a piece of rich text, and then in the podcast, you had an embed for the podcast player. So why do we have two different state models for them? It wasted a lot of resources, added a bit of a headache in managing it on the content side. So what if we actually took a step deeper into it and figure out what are these models built from? So when we looked at the templates, this is not a real story, like a real image, but just an approximation. So when you look at the template, it's actually a bunch of smaller models, UI components, if you say, that actually make up the template. So what if our content model is not necessarily mapping to a template, but instead our schema is just the UI components, and then we just render them to form a template. Similar to this, simply, like even if you have a big template, you are building any kind of interactivity or a feature in your website, ultimately it boils down to a body with a bunch of sections in the middle, right? Your hero, your piece of content, and then maybe your related articles. That's just one example. So what if we shifted those templates and moved them to a content editing concept, not a development concept, not a content structure concept? We don't care about it when we are rendering a page. And with that in mind, that means when you have different variety and different, not variety, variations in the same component, it's not necessarily in a new template anymore. It's just tweaking a little fields in the content schema or the models that we have. This is a very simple example. It might not give you the full idea, but let's assume these are two separate templates, right? All of them have an image, have a title, and have a piece of text in the middle. in the old website, what we'd have done is had two distinct content structures for them, named them differently because they're used in two different places. But in reality, all what we needed to add is really a Boolean flag to mirror it, right? So these are part of why we just find like we needed this rebuild to update all our content schemas and migrate them away from duplicated based on what variations we have into something that's more flexible that we can use to build templates on top. The next step in our migration really is moving away from complexity. So as I mentioned before, we're using Gatsby. Gatsby forces us to use React, but do we actually need React in this? We probably don't. We were perfectly happy, like the new website is perfectly happy with HTML, CSS, some JavaScript in some places, but it's mostly HTML and CSS, to be honest. And even the CSS, I use Tailwind. I'm a mobile developer, so don't blame me. And do we actually need a static site generation? So, I mean, I'm torn between that because even with us, well, spoiler alert, but we used Astro, so even with Astro, we can do static site generation, but it's actually proved more headache than it's worth because every update, you'll need it to rebuild the website, so you need to build some kind of a webhook mechanism or something to update your website. Every time you publish something, which I'm sure Sanity has great plugins to hook into Vercel or Netlify or whatever. But also the other headache is previews, because now you need to build your website, but have some kind of a server rendered version of it to support previews. So if it's already up and live, you might as well just serve it to the people. So yeah, with this in mind, we actually started on the implementation. So instead of just a fresh UI update and called it a day, we actually build it all from the ground up. So again, as I said, we used Astro, and I love Astro. I've been using it for a while now. From someone who doesn't really develop websites a lot, Astro is just really a fresh breeze of fresh air. Just HTML, CSS, no fuss. Very well documented. You can build like everything is in their documentation. Has really good plugins. And the best part about it, like I mentioned, is no looking UI framework. So you're not into React, you're not into Vue. If you want them, you can add them. If you don't, you still have your own HTML. They have hybrid mode as well. So if you want to statically generate sites, so Spaces and Tabs, my own company website, is actually Sanity with static site generation. But for Women in Tech SEO, we ended up using server-side rendering. So Astro really fit well with us because of its simplicity, and obviously that's why I'm here. And we use Sanity content management. And the big wins for us in using Sanity is actually the Sanity Studio. There is a whole lot of customization on it that we added. And it's like, for me at least, I felt it's really nice and really productive to have my schemas and everything defined in the same place where I actually do the rendering and write the code to render all these components. So it really fit well with my mental models and how we're working. And the query engine that Sanity has actually really helped us build this kind of page builder, because you don't know the parameters you are getting and what you want to pitch, because every page can have its own UI components. So it worked really well with how we query things, and I will give you a sneak peek of how we do actually the querying and how we avoid unnecessary calls later in the talk. So we are building a page builder on Sanity. So how do we structure the schema? I think I gave a bit of a brief overview early on. It's mainly we are focusing on UI components. We're not building templates. We are building UI components, and from that, templates become a separate concern for content editing, and we'll see how Sanity makes life easier in that as well, so we can bridge that gap. But I'll just walk you through some of the, I'm sure it's basic knowledge, but these basics is actually what set the project for success and made life easier for me as a developer and for the Women in Tech SEO team to edit their content and migrate it one by one. Well, first thing is easy. It's just enforcing rules. If you have any fields that are optional, should be optional or not, make sure to add your rules in the schema. That way, content editors can get this nice warnings when something go wrong, and you trust as a developer, you trust your own data that you are fetching, because you know that you put your rules in there, you know that when something is required, it's required, and it's not going to go missing. Clears a lot of the headaches. And something that we really lacked in the old website as well, we had some random values. Everything was almost optional, so you had quirky behavior in how things rendered. And other thing is really be descriptive. You have name, you have title, you have description. Use them to tell the content editors what exactly is this meant to do, especially in every field. So they have an idea on what they're trying to build. Obviously, you have your previews, but sometimes you just want filling the content early on. You don't want any misalignment. And yeah, next is choose sensible values for your previews. So I mean by this bit here, Sanity, the studio will pick up some default values for you if you don't define it, right? Which is a good start. But this data is contextual in where it is and what you are trying to build. So for example, if we are building a page here, I'd like to know what component I'm using or what component I'm editing. So you customize it to make sure that the preview gives you that subtitle, for example, in here in the head. So using sensible values for previews helped us make the content editing an easier, smoother experience. And shared UI elements have a schema for them. So if you don't have a design system, you still like to share some elements of UI here and there. And if you are already defining a schema for your UI components, you don't want to go about duplicating how a button looks, for example, like this button can have a background or can have a border or can have an icon. And all these are shared, and you want to standardize that across all the UI components. So it's easier for you to build that and support that on a schema level. So content editors can reuse that and can update it once and goes in all your AI components rather than just copying the same fields over and over across the AI components. And limit the free-form inputs, especially for things that have specific values. So again, Sanity Studio and your schema definition will really help you in getting like drop-downs or checkboxes or radio boxes for whatever you need to, again, it's all about removing any unknowns in the content editing journey, and as a developer, trusting the input you're getting. Like ultimately, you are getting a string, but if I know from the content editing side that I'm only getting this subset of strings, I can easily reason with that in my code and avoid any unnecessary edge case handling. And finally, do yourself a favor, do everyone a favor in your content editing team and enable previews. It's really easy to get the iframe up and running for us. There is a bit of logic to manage the perspectives and the tokens you are passing in to get this up and running. But once it is up and running, it's really helpful to avoid having a staging environment and a production environment, for example. You can leave everything on draft, renders a draft, and you can share feedback. And Studio is really amazing to have comments around and move and keep the collaboration going. So with all these in mind and the updates, we ended up having a structure similar to the one on the left. So we have one level, which is a shared UI components, such as your buttons, how your links, any requirements with images. We have a requirement that every image would have an alt text, for example. And to filter that through, we use the UI components directly in the other page blocks, I call them, or visual blocks. So for example, there is a form block or an author block or a header block. These reference the UI components and have their own fields. Usually once you clear out the images, clear out the UI components, what you are left with is what type of text are you using. Is it a normal text, long text, or a portable text? Doesn't really leave you much variety, which is good for standardizing. Even for a page builder, you don't know what you are rendering, so you need to standardize as much as possible the contract between the content and what you are building. And this is what a page looks like now. So instead of having a template and a bunch of fields to make the template, a page is just starts as an empty array, and you just fill it with the components you need, which is similar to any page builder you have right now. Like if you go to Squarespace or what have you, similar, you drag and drop, and then you fill each component individually. The good thing about this is just uses the designs and styles and the components that the content editors are familiar with, and they don't need to recreate it. And it's an environment where we can do more updates on, because how extensible the Sanity Studio is. So with that in mind, that's the Sanity part of it. How do we consume this data from Sanity? And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about how Astro integrates with Sanity. It's just a brief overview of the journey of a request, really. So we get a request. We only have one layout now because we eliminated all the different templates, all the different, everything that's configurable now is either coming from Sanity as a configuration by the content editors and whoever is maintaining the website, and either a build time configuration coming from environment variables and things like that. So simplifies a lot of the code. We stripped out all the layouts that we had, all the different templates. It's only a single template, and this is where the head with all its metadata gets rendered. Makes it so much easier to reason with, especially around SEO, around open graph meta tags and all these things like that. And obviously it makes it easy to put your scripts as well, like if you're tracking with Google Analytics or what have you. Page layout just references a block renderer, which essentially takes in what you fetched from Sanity and renders it on the screen as visual components, and you end up with a nice list of visual blocks, and all right, you have the screen. A little bit of how we call Sanity. So the initial version of what we had basically fetched the page from Sanity, got your references, and then each reference resolved itself. So you are making subsequent calls. If you have 10 API requests, 10 components on the screen, you are making 10 plus 1 calls, which will consume your Sanity credits really fast. So the trick that we did here is to resolve the first level of references when we are fetching the page. That's why I was talking about having a flexible query, because it just makes life easier. Resolving that first level of references just gets you almost all the visual components that we need. There is a few visual components that have references to other visual components, and these can be resolved ad hoc. They are not that much. So best case scenario, in almost the majority of the pages, you have just one call to the Sanity API. Worst case scenario, you do the n+1, but these are pretty rare for us, so we're happy with that kind of performance. Another thing is separation between these visual blocks, so they don't know about each other, and they don't know about the UI components they are referencing. Everything calls the renderer recursively to render any children that they need about. And again, that way, it's one easy way to standardize everything and make sure that you only have one source of truth on how things is rendered, instead of copying that visual implementation in different places to cater for it. So that's really everything on how we ship it. There is a lot more details. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. You can find me and ask me any questions about Astro later on. But for now, I'll just leave you for what's next for the Women in SEO website. With most of the updates that's coming next, hopefully we'll manage to do it, or I will manage to do it later for them, is going to revolve around content editing. So remember the screenshots I showed you earlier where the page is just a block of items, right? Content editors still need to work around templates. So one thing to add, I think not, is initial value templates. So basically a fancy button that create a blog page that will basically create a page, add all the relevant blocks for them, so they can just fill in the content and don't have to worry about what visual component type I need to use here or there. Extension to that is improving the duplication behavior. Because we are using references, every page when you duplicate it, it carries over the references, which is not ideal if you are content editing and just want to duplicate a blog post and just update the content. You'll end up overwriting. So again, another duplicate button that will actually work on duplicating all the references as you go will be helpful for content editor. So that will be coming soon to their website. And finally, visual editing. I just saw it got recently merged into the Astro integration, so hopefully we'll get into that, because again, with the previews that we have, that will make content editing a lot easier. And that's it from me. Thank you so much. I have a written version of that talk, so if anyone can read it. Thank you so much.
Hi everybody, how's it going? I'm Jono from Roboto Studio, and today we're going to be talking about 5 key takeaways from websites that we absolutely loved building. So let's start by talking about what is Roboto Studio. So we are a development agency that is hell-bent on providing the best editorial experience that you can get right now. What is the best editorial experience? For us, it's Next.js, Vercel, and of course, Sanity. And we've basically been building the exact same website for about 3 years now. So let's start with number one. Number one, migrating old websites. If anybody's actually migrated a website here, you know how much of a nightmare it is. And so I wanted to talk about things that you actually can do when you are migrating them. So something that's really, really difficult is internal links. So migrating an internal link from content to content is very difficult. Taking images is incredibly difficult as well. Working with alt tags for images, that's another thing. And then finally, pulling existing categories from different web pages is really, really tricky. However, something that we don't talk about enough is web scraping and the power of actually using that. So let's talk about one of our clients, Jam. So they had 4,500 products. They had 200 blog posts. And out of those 200 blog posts, they had interlinking internal links into those products. And now all of those products have changed categories as part of this migration. And it's incredibly tricky to be able to get that content and move it over to a new website. So with that being said, we managed to get 100% migration coverage. And you know what's crazy about this? We actually managed to do it because of web scraping rather than actually having access to the back end. So something that people forget about very, very often is the way that you can actually use web scraping and integrate it directly into Sanity to be able to populate content. And with that being said, we're on to number 2. So we're going to talk about integrations now. So when we talk about integrations, a lot of people are going to think just web applications and how they would integrate into Sanity. But there's a lot more stuff that you can actually do with it. I'll give you a quick example now that we've done recently. So with YouTube, you may have a incredible channel that you're putting a lot of content out on, and you actually want to integrate this directly with your website. Now, if you would do this in the old days, what you would do is you would sit there and you would copy, paste, put it over. It's a real pain in the arse, but it's very, very open for human error. There's no end of times that I've put something over and it's actually not spelled correctly or it's missed out punctuation. But the beauty of integrations is that we can actually interconnect YouTube with Sanity and create a brand new document type. So you have your YouTube videos directly in the studio. It's pretty neat. The other benefit that you have when you actually pull this data into the studio is that you can actually enrich that data with Sanity. So for example, if you know that a YouTube video actually has a lot of interesting stuff about, let's talk about integrations, you can actually have related blogs that talk about integration. So it's really nice how you can start building on top with these content layers and all these fancy bits and pieces. And with that being said, I want to talk about cron jobs and API integration with our next client. So we had the Techro project, which was essentially integrating HubSpot with Sanity. Now, a lot of people actually use HubSpot for marketing, for analytics, all that fancy stuff. But the usual experience of HubSpot is somebody goes into HubSpot. The most likely thing they want is the forms because they're really good for funneling people down to convert. But the experience to actually get that form into a website involves going to HubSpot's embed form, taking the little iframe, putting that on your website, hoping that it doesn't have any like iframe hijacking or anything else like that. And it's not the best experience. So you can actually directly integrate the API from HubSpot into Sanity. And so we did that for Techro. So we integrated their HubSpot accounts. So whenever they build a PPC campaign or something that we want to try and convert, we essentially have the ability to just reference the form from HubSpot. We run a cron job to basically pull this data so it's always fresh and it's always the latest and greatest forms that they create. The other interesting one about this is Wistia. So if anybody's used Wistia before, they do have an API available. So you can pull, for example, podcasts, you can pull videos, all of this fancy stuff. But the one thing they don't have is transcripts available. So if you were to, for example, pull a podcast, you probably want to also get that transcript. So the interesting thing that you can do, and what I would always advise doing, is actually run a scraper with it. So you can take that API request and you can basically stack that with the scraper and get all of that rich information and put it inside of Sanity. It's worth mentioning though, split these two things. So split it to editable content and split it to content that's basically being pulled in from an API, because you don't want to do destructive stuff on editable content. And I want to talk about number 3 today. So number 3 for us, don't worry, there's only 2 more. Set and forget SEO. So set and forget SEO is where essentially you're using the structured data that already exists in Sanity to essentially populate JSON LD for Google. This is incredible stuff because you've already got all the structured content from your content management system. And Google essentially just wants this content management, this content that you've written in a format that it can basically take and run with. So the beauty with the brand new thing, the Sanity TypeScript generation, works directly hand in hand with the Schema DTS TypeScript tool, if you've seen this about. So if you use those two in combination, you can essentially get all of that data from your Sanity Studio and combine that with all of the data that Google actually wants to see. So, for example, we worked with a company called Futurepedia that did exactly this. They wanted to generate pillar content, and the pillar content was really focused, like pin focused on organic SEO. So when we were building that organic SEO content, we essentially populated all that JSON so that they could try and rank for things like AI productivity tools, AI, image generation, this kind of fun stuff. The other bit that was interesting about this particular project was the fact that we were using, again, scrapers to be able to pull newsletters, their AI events. So with their newsletters, it was their previous email campaigns, but it completely populated inside of Sanity. So you've got both of those in one location. And the beauty of it is not a singular curly bracket inside. So when they were actually building these JSON, they didn't even realize they were building JSON in the studio. It was literally set and forget. This one is, so number 4 is a really, really complex one, but it might be useful for certain people out there. So this is the idea of, if you look at something like BBC News, you have a document where it may exist on both latest news, and that exists there, and it may also exist on, local news, Nottingham, news latest. So those two, it has to exist on at the same time. Now, these are notoriously hard to build because you have to either build them rigidly or you have to think of some way to be able to extend these out. And we actually built a custom URL builder to be able to do this. So every single step of that URL, so for example, the latest would show the latest blogs of the news, the latest local news would pull all of the latest local news, and so on and so forth, all the way down the URL structure. So it's just a really clever way of being able to scale your content completely without a developer, because this is all done on URL root generation, and get all of that rich data put into a hierarchical structure. So we actually built this for Global Cycling Network, and this underpins the entire way that the project works. So if you can see at the top there, we have things like the breadcrumbs where it says GCN, racing, news. Each one of those URLs essentially tells you information about that particular blog post. So every single one, it's stacked up and hierarchical. It's pretty tricky to build, and it's only really achievable because you can do so many incredible things with Grok and the queries within Grok, if that makes sense. And so finally, this one's my personal interest, automating as much marketing as possible. So when we're building things for the website, the biggest sticking point that I've always had is generating meta descriptions, generating open graph descriptions, thinking about how I'm going to source the imagery for all of these, and being able to populate all of these with, like a keyword focused, long tail, short tail, all that kind of stuff. I find it incredibly boring. And I think that the easiest way to do it is by generating a lot of this with AI, or basically repurposing content with AI. So with that in mind, I want to show a very quick video, if it works. Yeah, great. So this is essentially a very quick demo of showing how you can generate each part of the title, the description, the SEO, open graph. In our case, we have something called cards. So cards for us is basically where you would reference that blog post from one part of the website to the next. Essentially, all of this functionality is done using Sanity's AI Assist. And the beauty of Sanity's AI Assist, and this is the real cool thing that I don't think enough people necessarily talk about, is the internationalization. So right this second, there has never been an easier way to get into internationalization. So usually when you are actually publishing something to an internationalized audience, you have to get translators involved. You have a huge cost before you can even start putting stuff out there. Today, you can set up with Sanity, with Next.js, for example, and have a fully internationalized website working within a day or two. So there's never been a better time to do it. And the whole idea of AI, and this is the last thing I want to really talk about, is instead of just generating content with it, because let's be completely real, if it's just AI generated content, it's not very good. The main thing you want to do is focus on using it to enrich the content that you would write yourself. And so using AI Assist, Sanity's AI Assist, you can basically do a hell of a lot of stuff with the content that you write and repurpose, and save all of that time that would usually get burnt doing these manually. So thanks everybody for listening today. Appreciate taking the time out, and yeah, cheers.
Thanks, Jono. That was terrific. And yeah, I think the AI Assist, it's very tough when you're looking at a blank field, don't know what to write, but then AI writes something and it immediately evokes the feeling I can do something better than that. So Evelina, you were next. If you want to come up and get set up there. There are a lot of Sanity people in the room. Raise your hand if you are a Sanity colleague of mine. Look at them all. If you want to bring your questions, bring your complaints afterwards, go and find them, and they will absolutely have all of the answers to all of your questions. Evelina is from Love Holidays, long-time Sanity customer, and always very interested to see what they're doing with the platform.
There we go. Screen. Function F. That's helpful.
Sorry.
Sorry. It's a meetup. It's scrappy. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.
It's great if you stand from your laptop.
Okay,
It's very
cool.
like it's for a stream. And where's your other mic?
Amazing.
Give me 5 seconds to sit back there.
That's fine. I'll get my. Hi everyone, welcome to my talk. I'm Evelina, and I'll be covering a bit around how we at Love Holidays ensured crisis readiness by kind of utilizing Sanity to our benefit and having non-developers power that content to build our app and our website. So just briefly about myself, I'm a software engineer. I've been that for 4.5 years now or so, and I did an 11-week boot camp, so I'm kind of an ex-molecular biologist turned software engineer. Did a boot camp in Amsterdam, 11-week boot camp. Not going to say I was like a great developer after that, but came to Love Holidays and have learned a lot since being there. And for those of you who don't know Love Holidays, it's an online travel agency And that's been around for, I guess, more than 10 years now, actually. And the vision is to become Europe's #1 holiday provider. And we intend to do so by giving people, our customers, basically like a lot of choice and the ability to mix and match their own holidays. Currently, we sell holidays in both the British, the German, and the Irish markets. And in the next slide, I'll share a little bit around how kind of we utilize Sanity and our tech stack, just like briefly to set the context. And then I'll go into my own experience in leading this initiative called Crisis Readiness, and also talk about what crisis means in this case. So yeah, this is actually just some screenshots that I took of our website. So that is the homepage to the left, and then to the right is one of our landing pages. And this is basically, both of these are driven from Sanity completely, and it's, well, completely, I say, actually the screenshots, there's like a search UI and stuff like that, but I cut that out in both content and like the static structure of it. And we basically empower our non-engineers and non-developers to make improvements to our site as part of like a rapid development cycle. So, you know, maybe you have more certain content driven from Sanity, but we have a lot of content driven from Sanity, and we do this basically in a server-driven UI manner, and I will talk about how that works. So this is not a deep dive at all, but it's just basically to set the kind of context around how all of this works. So our website is server-side rendered with client-side interactions and navigations, and yeah, basically means that, you know, the HTML you get when you land on a page or land on a URL is complete for that page and shouldn't change until you actually navigate. And then for our kind of JavaScript to server interaction, we use the GraphQL backend for front end. And then in the past year or so, probably a bit longer, we've been migrating and basically making, we've been inspired by Airbnb, how they actually do like a server-driven UI. So that means that our client, our front end in React and TypeScript is quite dumb. Like it doesn't really have a lot of logic in it, and it doesn't really know the concept of bespoke pages. So instead of knowing that, it's like per a given URL, we'll basically request generic page data from, you know, GraphQL, the GraphQL backend front end. Some of that will come from the Sanity CMS. And then basically our GraphQL server will respond with typed components that the front end then will render. And yeah, like I said, I won't talk more about this, but I have some colleagues in the audience that have built this and that are experts on this, and also how we use Sanity in general at our company. So if you're interested in more of that, please come and talk to us later. But I've also referenced the Airbnb blog post at the end of this talk. And yeah, I'm no expert in Sanity, but I just wanted to share a bit about my experience in running this initiative with the help of obviously our dedicated web infrastructure team. I'm looking at Chris, he's the only one that's present here, but we have other people that are great at it. But yeah, with the help of them, and also I think just the Sanity documentation is very clear, and I sometimes found tech documentation to be a bit boring, but I found Sanity ones to be very like entertaining, is maybe the wrong word, but you know what I mean. I found it easy to use, that it's like I know how to use it. And I think last time I actually used Sanity is like 3 years ago, because we have more of a dedicated team, but this was quite easy. So yeah, how do we empower our non-developers to get ready for a potential crisis? Well, basically, I want to start with what is a crisis in the world of travel. So when I say crisis, that can be anything from, you know, wildfires to earthquakes, so anything that can actually impact customer traveling. So I will share a real life example of how this will look like, and also in an unexpected way. And one of our accommodation suppliers actually went under, which is not great, but this is basically what we set out to prepare for. So in 2023 alone, there were actually 4 major incidents, as I'm sure you're aware of. You know, there were an Icelandic volcano that erupted. There was wildfires in roads. So there was a lot happening last year. And this is kind of before we had all our server-driven UI in place. And, you know, our customer experience team, they worked really hard to communicate as fast as possible and was like able to manage calls and all of that. But we realized there was kind of a clear gap in how we kind of contacted our customers and made sure that that came out quickly. So if I look at it from more of a customer point of view, I might, something happens, I'll open the chat, I'll be like, is my holiday impacted? Can I still go on my holiday? And you might feel quite stressed. And there's nothing in kind of, I forgot to say it, but I work in the manage my booking team. So it's kind of like the post experience. So you'll go to your manage my booking, you go to your app, you'll see like, is something happening? And you don't see anything. So basically, earlier, how this works is like, it could take up to 3 days for this message to get out to our customers, because we have to wait for, app releases and all of that. And then you see here in this graph, you can see like you basically missed like the influx of customers, and also some people might have already gone on holiday and aren't sure. And yeah, we don't want to cause people stress, obviously, when they're going to go on their holidays. So basically, what we did is that we our summer holiday peak. So this was at the beginning of May. We wanted to make sure that we are ready for, a potential crisis. Obviously, we hope that there are no crises, but as we can see later, this has been used already. And we worked together with like a cross-functional team around across, customer experience, content, comms, to like define what an MVP would look like. And also, it's very important that like non-developers and people that are not engineers are part of this, because they're supposed to use it. So from day one, we worked with them and like talked about how do you want to use it and what should include, and then define the MVP. So like I said, non-developers should add messaging in this manage my booking homepage, which is this one. I'll talk a bit more in a second. We want to reduce the strain, our customer experience team. And then we don't want to have any app releases, because we don't want to rely on anyone else and ourselves to get this out. And we also want to make sure that there are some guardrails in place, obviously, because we shouldn't just be alerting our customers in case there isn't anything to be alerted about. So that is key. And also, this is just kind of a snapshot of a holiday. This is in our app. You are going to Portugal, you have like your itinerary item. This is the way you can kind of amend your holiday. You can see where you're going, all of that stuff. So the idea is that the alert will kind of pop up here and be part of that. You'll see it in a second, but we don't want to overload that page with too much content. So this was like key in defining what we're going to do with this. So how did we get there? Obviously, it was Sanity. And then this is kind of the main structure. So we get a little bit of insight of how this looks like. We don't have all of it here because I don't have access to all of it. So, but you'll see here on the left side that I actually created a new MMB directory. So it's for several reasons, but one of them is it's easy to manage permissions that way. So obviously not everyone should have access to this, because it's important that we are careful with this message. And also, as we scale, I talked about us wanting to become, Europe's #1 holiday provider. We need to think of like how we scale and have growth, have that growth mindset. So previously, we would have maybe put this under like site content, but that would have meant that we'd have to like copy it from like the German site to the UK site, and we're moving away from that. So this was like one other opportunity to not use that. And you'll see a little snapshot of what that looks like. Going into, hopefully everyone sees it. Like my colleague said, maybe you should have done like white mode and not like dark mode. And I realized that before, but I'm a developer, so I do dark mode mostly. But this is an untitled alert, which is also not ideal. But basically how it works is that you would add a booking ID, or outside of Sanity, you query BigQuery, for example, you query the affected bookings, and then you would add that into this like simple text field. We did talk about if we were going to use like a file type or something like that, but we didn't really know how to handle that fully, and it wasn't something we had used. So we kind of decided that a simple text field is fine, because we can just add these booking IDs and kind of filter through them later. We also didn't obviously know, because every crisis is different, as we don't know how many booking IDs are going to be. I think we tested around like 20,000, and like Sanity UI was fine with that. We were like, cool, this is going to be fine, but I'll talk about later what happened. But you live and you learn. And then basically next on this alert, we have a headline and we also have kind of a message. I'll share a bit how this looks like obviously in a second, but both the headline and the message are using the field level localization. So you can add per language. So I've not added anything here now, but you can add that per language. We're also utilizing kind of like a customized field for like the block content here or the block type, where we're using just a simple paragraph and a link, because like I said earlier, we don't want to have too much content on the page. So we've added that. There's some custom validation around what type of link you can add. There's also some custom validation around how many characters you can add. Again, we don't want to overload, so there's been a lot of customization going on here, a lot of descriptions to make sure that everyone understands how to use this. And then finally, we also have like an optional button, which is also using field level localization. And this is kind of if we need to kind of gather more information from a customer, we want to like link them out to, for example, a form that they can fill in so we can contact them with more information. So yeah, how does this all work in practice? So basically, this is something I kind of quickly put together. But if a crisis happens, the idea is that a non-developer can go to Sanity, add an alert quickly, and publish. And then our graphical backend for front end will add this to something we call a mandatory resource. And basically, what that is that we fetch these resources, these data, and on startup and update that data on an interval that we set, and we've set this to 10 minutes. We can like switch that and we can have it be longer or shorter. And then basically it's very beneficial in a crisis like this because you might need to update your booking IDs quite often because as someone go on holiday, someone come back, so you need to be able to like get this out immediately. And then yeah, the function itself is super simple. It's basically just looping through that data and then basically going through doing like a grok query and checking like, is there an alert? Cool. If there's an alert, we'll do a simple lookup per booking ID and locale, and then decide where enough to return this alert component. And then in the server-driven UI way, we can basically server-side render this quickly to our customers and both in app and web. I didn't really speak about this earlier, but we basically write the same code for our app and for our web. We do that with the help of a framework called Capacitor.js, and it's basically like something, a framework that kind of wraps it web app into a native app. So we've gone from 3 days to like 10 minutes basically if you add this alerting quickly, and it should be simple. I think that's pretty cool. And then I just wanted to like share a bit how it looked like. So this is just actually this does not happen. This is just so I could share. But I added that in. I did this, and then you would see this in 10 minutes later, basically. And if I update that booking ID, I would see, that in another one. So it works quite seamlessly, I would say. And we were, I guess, hoping to not be able to use this, but we've already used it like 2 weeks later. And we're already learned a bunch of things that we probably could have done better. But that's the typical developer life, right? You always iterate. So I think it's fine. I want to talk about just how we've used it and what I've learned and what we want to do next a bit more. So a little bit more, I don't know if people are aware of, love holidays and have followed, but a bit more than 2 weeks ago, one of our accommodation suppliers actually filed for insolvency. That caused a lot of distress for our customers, which is not great. And this basically caused us to utilize this alert sooner, and maybe in a way we didn't really think we were going to use it, but that's the beauty of tech. I think you can always reuse it and change things and use it if needed. So when the news broke, there was like a huge cross-team functional effort to communicate and rebook the people that were actually affected. So that was kind of like sending out SMSs, being very proactive. So we weren't like waiting for people to go to the app and check. We were doing that. But then as the news broke to a bigger audience, people started kind of confusing that our suppliers was us. So people thought, we had gone under. So that was not great. And then our communication teams were like, okay, we should probably talk to people and communicate that this is not the case. That happened on our social, and then we got an even bigger influx of a customer being like, is my booking affected? So there was a lot of I feel bad for the agents that are working tirelessly to help a lot of customers, and then they get a lot of kind of noise around people that weren't affected, and it's kind of like handling that. So we kind of had to think quick on our feet, and what we did is that we changed. So you could see it was kind of a red critical urgent alert earlier. I did just like a quick one-line change in our backend for front end because I didn't really have time to go in and change this in Sanity, and I changed that from because I didn't say that earlier, but this alert component is something we have. It's like powered through our design system. We have different variants for that, so it's kind of like a component that works for a lot of use cases. So just change that from kind of a critical look to an informative look, so blue. And we did this, which, it's great that we could use it. The only other thing is we weren't really thinking we were going to send this to everyone that's not affected. So that was like hundreds of thousands of people. And adding that into Sanity kind of broke the UI a bit, which is fair because, we weren't really going to use it like this. So we had to that's why you see like both of the, it was 2 alerts here, which is basically for the same, but we just divided the alerts into, or the booking IDs into 2 alerts. I think obviously it's not great that we have to use this, but it's great that it was in place. And I think we've learned a lot of it from, I don't think we could have foreseen that this was going to happen, that we were going to use it in this way. But basically, as of last week, we've already implemented kind of the drop down. Actually, I can share that. No, first I forgot this actually. So this is how it would look like. People come in, they're like, you're not you're unaffected. You don't have to do anything. Don't worry. Also, it's very cost effective to do this. Instead of sending SMS out to hundreds of thousands of people, we could just get this out in 10 minutes. And we could already see that people were sharing on socials to be like, we're not unaffected, kind of, I guess, spreading the word for us and having people go to the app and the website and see that, they're fine. Because it was a subset of people and some of them have already been booked on another hotel. So yeah, again, it wasn't great that we had to use it, but I think it's cool that it was in place, and how Sanity could power this in 10 minutes, thanks to the whole infrastructure, is pretty cool. And yeah, what's next? I've already talked about, I've implemented this drop down, which kind of is informative critical. I think there needs to be some guidelines on how and when to use the alert. It shouldn't just be overly used because, like I said, they're also kind of pushing the content down. And yeah, you don't want to it's supposed to be more of if there's anything the customer needs to do, or if there's something they worry about, it shouldn't just be used to just send out extra information. So and then I think it's also around, obviously, in a crisis, there's a lot of cross-team effort, and it's kind of been, some of us engineers that helped out with this. And in an ideal world, this should be fully driven from non-developers. They should be able to do all of this, which they can. It's just that they have been working tirelessly on a lot of other things. So obviously we know this, we built this, so it's not like we can go in and update this. It's fine. Happy to help, obviously. I'm sorry, I went too fast. And then we have a preview and schedule, which we're thinking about. I know our team, web infrastructure, have worked on this. So it's basically like a custom field that the preview content would, in an ideal world, basically take a booking from the booking ID list and log into a staging booking, and then you would have to see it obviously before you actually publish it. And then scheduling, I think, is also cool. If you know that something has happened or you want to send out a new message on Monday morning, you just get it. So I think that would be pretty cool to have. And then finally, I think the North Star is that anyone can configure and control messages based on certain booking elements. So instead of having to create that in BigQuery in a different place, you would do all that. It would be powered from there. You would say these dates, this destination, this airport, and stuff like that. But yeah, this is a bigger conversation, I think, around comms in general. But I think that is something that we thought of, at least. So yeah, thank you.
And Evelina, that was terrific. It was really interesting to see behind the curtain there, and another real-world application that perhaps might be a bit uncommon. I'll get Toby to come forward and start getting set up. I was just thinking through that talk. I create a lot of guides, a lot of tutorials, and I have to create different content models and have to try and think of new ones regularly. And they're usually fun examples like record collections or holidays or learning or shopping. They're aspirational things, but I don't think I've ever once content modeled a crisis. And but that's the reality. That's what's really happening out there. So a new example for the next tutorial, perhaps. But we've got Toby next from Even Six. There's a number of Even Six people in the room here today. I got a sneak peek at this earlier. This really is something. So some fancy visuals on display. And I believe a live demo too. I don't want to spook it. This will be the first one of the evening. No jinxing it. It's going to work flawlessly. All right, I'll hand over to Toby.
One, two. So this one might be a little bit controversial. How boring is structured content?
Boo.
Now, you know, this is obviously a bit of a biased room. Talk to a number of people and they might say very. We're here to challenge that, okay? We're here to challenge that. Hello, I'm Toby, Technical Creative Director at Even Six. Now, Even Six is a digital brand and product agency. So what that means is, really, I am the Creative Director at Even Six. That's a single reference you can see right there. Now, I'm also known as technically a Creative Director at Even Six. That's an away reference you can see right there. That's multiple creative directors. Semantics are important at Even Six. Semantics are important for structured content. Semantics are important for sanity. But the truth is, nobody grows up dreaming of structured content. It's a shame, I know. Equally, nobody grows up dreaming of the W3C, schema.org, page speeds, technical SEO. We grew up dreaming of what's possible. So for me, at least, the web was where that was happening. There were no limits, no restrictions, and infinite possibilities. Whatever you can dream up can be made possible. That was the promise. Have we forgotten that about the web? Sometimes I do wonder that. Like, that was a really exciting moment for all of us when we used to, you know, look at the things like Google Awards and stuff like that and look and think, wow, like, that's incredible. How did that even happen? How did we do that? Let's get back to that a little bit as well. You know, sometimes I think it's exciting to show what's possible in the web. This is our corner of the web. We can do whatever we want in that place. So let's push it a little bit, is what we're saying. So let's show what's possible with structured content. Rather than boring people with the benefits, I'm going to jump into what is actually possible. We believe we can leverage the power of structured content to make digital experiences more current, more relevant, and more personalized without creating extra work for people. That is the challenge. Can we at least attempt to make structured content vaguely exciting? This could be a stretch. Let's put structured content to work though, and then we can all be the judge of that. Using a 3D model, sanity, because structured content, sanity, and 3D, you'll have to listen to Trust Even Six on this one, are best friends. So let's take a company like Sanity. Now, there's a few sanity people in this room. They'll know that Sanity isn't a real company, but just bear with me on this one. An innovative tech-first cycling brand. Now, Sanity have products. And those products, they could be a bike or they could be bike parts. What's familiar between the two of them is the fact that they both use components. Now, we can attach a lot of structured content to those components, which is where a lot of magic can start to happen. So we could say that a component is mentioned in a review. We could say that it's mentioned in an article. We could say that that component resulted in a stat. We could say that it was manufactured by a particular manufacturer, and we could say that component has features. I'll get to the last bit in a second. But what are these components? Frame, we could have forks, we could have the levers, we could have the mechanical parts of the bike. Every single part of that bike is a component. And like I was just saying, you could have a review, and that review could be in Sanity. You might be mentioning a certain part of that component, like we can see here. We might be just mentioning a particular part of a bike in an article. So somebody might be saying something about the wheels, about the saddle, whatever it might be. That can be quite light. And those result in stats, like I just said, so power increase, things like that. The specs for the bike could be how much it weighs, it could be the dimensions of it. And there's lots of stories that we can say here, right? So if we said that this designer created this wheel for this reason, and we wrote a story about that, that can become quite engaging, particularly when you're trying to sell a bike like this, which we'll get to in a second. I think we made up the figure, it was about £10,000. So you've got to tell a few stories to try and convince somebody to spend £10,000, okay? So yeah, it could be manufactured by a completely different brand to Sanity, and it might have these different features. But what we're here today is to talk about structured content and 3D models. So what does that mean? Well, what we have here, this is a bit of a lie. The girls from Mean 6 know this is not technically how it works. But we have a component which has a camera position that's attached to the component. We might well have a bike, and that bike will also require a camera position because the bike has multiple components. Let's zoom out a little bit, show what all those component parts look like together. Now, this is all quite hypothetical at the moment, so what we're going to attempt to do, as Simia mentioned, is a bit of a live demo to show what this actually looks like in Sanity and in presentation mode. So this is all a 3D model with structured content. You can see that if I start to scroll, it can start to do some quite cool stuff. We can change the colors completely for the page. And if I just go back onto this one, you can then start to see that that component story is actually quite powerful, because now what we're looking at is the cockpit of this bike, and that is pulling some content. Now, if I go into this page, just really quickly, you will see that this cockpit, this component, has literally no information in it. So why is it that there's no information here, but I'm seeing a seamless single unit construction, all the description about that component? I can see what material it's made from, the weight of it, I can see the designer, the brand, and even a story that's related to it. Well, that is the power of structured content at work. So one of the things that we can see from, say, over here is this is the article that references that piece of content. If I was to go into here, I can show you that somebody's done a product call out. So somebody might have merchandised this article to reference a particular product. Now, as I showed you a second ago, a product could be a bike part, which is still a component. So we can resolve all of those references. And that is how that piece of content made its way into that page. Literally just by somebody merchandising an article. That's the power of structured content at work. Okay, so now we're going to attempt some of the more dangerous parts of our live demo. So just to prove to you that this is a 3D model with all of these component parts within there, I'm going to now attempt to reorder this 3D model. And this is something that can be created so content editors could tell a more compelling story on this landing page. So what we're going to do, and everybody bear with me on this one, is we're going to put the fork to the top of the page. We give that a second. This is the power of using Sanity and presentation. You can start to see all of this structured content coming together and even be able to navigate it. That's what presentation's there for, in my opinion. You can do some very complicated things. Now, hopefully, that is updated. No? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So cool. So yeah. So now you can see that the forks, top of the list. I can just reorder it, and that is because the camera position was put against the component. We're not trying to, create 3D models all the time. We're trying to work smart here. So camera position, everything is all bound to the component rather than at the bike itself. Let's go a step further and try and do something even more complicated here and really push it. Okay, so here we have the S600 cockpit seamless single unit construction. let's go a little bit of a step further and let's see what happens. Let's pretend that Sanity just brought out an upgraded version of that cockpit. And that is an array list. This is set up so it can actually play quite nicely as a product configurator. Here we have the S600 cockpit V2. I'm going to publish that. Let's really, really test it now. Okay, so just let's look at that. There's nothing on the top of that cockpit. I feel like a magician. Right, here we go. So, did everybody have your fingers crossed? So here we go. Now, you'll notice that product can just be updated. It's a component part. So you can update that from a single place. That bike has multiple components. I can update a component part to that bike. And everywhere that I show imagery or 3D for that bike can be updated from a single source of truth. That is my attempt at trying to make structured content exciting for everybody. It was a short talk, but hopefully you all enjoyed it. Yeah, that is the end of my talk.
Thank you for that. I think that absolutely succeeded. Flash is back. Sort of look like. Oh, now I have to get set up.
So what you saw there is also our demo that Even 6 helped us out with. It's great. Maybe at some point you can buy those bikes. If this content management stuff doesn't work out, we can pivot to bikes. Let's see. Yeah, well, you should, yeah, we need the camera. Right, there we are. All right, so we have been doing stuff the last 6 months or so. And what we very often notice when we're out and about is that people didn't read our email about the new thing. And they weren't aware that we did a thing. And to catch up, y'all, and I meant for that, we have seen this. I think we have 9. So I hope you didn't have to do all of the 96 flights. And yeah, let you know what we have been working on and some future stuff. Some stuff even I thought it was in the future and it shipped today while we were here. So yeah, take it away. Give me 10 seconds.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so I talk quickly so we can get through 96 slides very quickly. All right, so today's talk is called Sanity is Cooking. Who's used Sanity for at least a year? Keep your hand up if it's 3 years. I've been at Sanity for 3. We got some 4, 5. I started 5 years ago, 2019. Looks like everyone's tapped out. All right, so I've had the pleasure of being at Sanity for the last studios. Now we have this locales repo, which is really clever. Some of our engineers hook that up with AI. So there's AI-powered translations of new strings as they're added to the studio. And you can also localize your plugins as well. So anything that you ship to present, share screen. I don't need to narrate this, but I will. Share, click, wallpaper, Alt-Tab. Excellent, we're back. The validate documents CLI. You can now validate all the documents in the data set. Currently, this was a very difficult, well, previously this was a very difficult thing to do across all documents. You had to validate documents one by one, and that can be quite slow and annoying. But now that you can just run this command across the entire data set, is that a video that's going to run? No, but you can run that from the command line, and it will show you the status of all of your documents there. And this was an important step to get us towards TypeScript support, I believe, but the ability to just check all documents in the data set, because the studio, even though you write those validation rules, the data stored in the content lake is not guaranteed to be a one-to-one with what your studio says. So the studio can be a lie, and the content lake will send you anything, because you can write anything you want to the content lake. So it is important to be able to validate documents against your studio markup, and it will tell you, oh, the video's playing, and it will tell you what's valid and what's not, what you need to go back and fix. This is also excellent for migration, because the content that you pull out of some other service is likely broken in some way, and so to be able to migrate thousands of documents into the Sanity Studio, into the content lake, and then validate the status of them is very important as well. Thanks, YouTube. Comments are now on by default in the January 19 release. So comments, one of those things that I'm really excited about comments in the Sanity Studio because of how boring they are in such a way. They just work. There's not really much to them, but they've been a huge unlock of productivity in the studio. Just one of those features that once we shipped, you just assume they've always been there because it was so useful to use. The desk was renamed Structure. You might see that deprecation in some of your imports as well. Small thing, but we did also ship a code mod to go and rename that in your code. If you don't want to change 2 lines in your studio, we can do it for you. We also added a union cache to GraphQL deploy. Who knew that? I didn't know that, and now I do. And it apparently improves schema generation up to 95%. So again, these are the things that you just miss out on if you don't crawl the changelog every week. We've got deprecated fields now. I'm not sure if anybody's used this, but this has been really useful when you've got a really long-lived project. If you have been using Sanity for 5 years or so, you've probably got all sorts of hairy data that you need to get rid of and get editors to stop using. You can mark it as deprecated. It has no functional effect on the data, but it at least gives a nice big scary warning to somebody, and you can tell them not to use this field anymore and use something else. And you can deprecate entire document types. You can deprecate singular fields. We also shipped comment reactions, because those are extremely important for boosting morale and sort of giving that thumbs up. To me, the thumbs up emoji has a double meaning now. It's like, please stop talking. Like, this conversation has ended. That's what the thumbs up emoji means to me. The all-new Sanity Studio design, this one could be a bit spicy. Actually, if we wanted to put an emoji reaction on this one, maybe a hot pepper would be good, because it completely changed the design of it. I won't ask for a raise of hands who loves it, who doesn't. But I think now that it's settled for quite a while, it's great. Redesigns of applications are very difficult. Team put an awful lot of work in to clean up the studio, and it does look cleaner. And I know certainly it's grown on me. So it's reduced the visual noise that was there before. Everything kind of looks very big in some of the old studio screenshots you'll see here as well. There's some migration tooling that we've launched as well. This has been really awesome. They are migration tooling helpers so that you can create migration scripts. Previously, if you needed to migrate content inside of a Sanity Studio, and this is more thoughts around like long-lived projects where you need to change data structures. If you've ever had to change a single reference to an array of references, if you've needed to change a string to a portable text field, those can be quite tricky things to do. So now we have these migration helpers to create these scripts for you. They will do the more difficult things like batching transactions together. They also have a sort of a secondary usage, and again, it's where my mind's at the moment, is actually using them for migration tooling as well, because they do handle bulking together transactions. They can be very useful for creating new documents at scale as well. Not sure why that slide's there. No, schema validation, that's different, isn't it? Well, I was looking at document validation before. So now we're going to do schema validation at the same time to check if there's any issues in the schema. I think this was also a stepping stone towards our TypeScript support. Usually when I do these meetups, I'm one of like 2 people from Sanity in the room. And now that there's more of you here, I've got this pressure on me that maybe some of the things I'm saying aren't true. And when there's no engineers in the room, I can just say that stuff and you believe me. And now there's engineers in the room, I'm sort of a little bit worried. It's useful for migrations as well, schema validation. So that's excellent. All right, great. AI Assist version 2 launch, which actually that was mentioned in one of the talks tonight as well, the ability to translate documents. There was a lot of work put in to make sure that the AI Assist was configured to work with all of the different ways that you can localize content, because we do realize that there are a number of ways. You can do document level, you can do field level with objects, field level with arrays. The translation with AI works with all of those. It is configured to design, it's designed to work with all of those, which is excellent. And it's very much designed to just be the fastest path to be able to translate documents and translate content and have it just write straight to the studio. If you need more options, other providers are still useful for that, and that's why there's still support for those. But if you just need the fastest possible translations in the studio, you click that button and that will do that straight away. We launched comments in Portable Text Editor as well in March here. So now you can actually select short snippets of text and have that be able to write comments directly on individual pieces of text inside Portable Text. So that wasn't shipped with the first version of comments, but it is there now. There's the ability to weight searches against particular fields. And there was an update to document actions too. So when you are writing Sanity schema types, now you can infer that some fields have a higher weight than others when you are searching in the studio for those things. So perhaps when a person's searching for documents of a particular type, you want to make sure that the name field carries more weight than the description, for example. That's one. And now this next section, this is the one that I am certain nobody knew that it existed outside of the engineer that made it for the person that they made it for. But your document actions can actually appear up here now. Why? I don't know. But when you run a custom document action, if you want it to be in the top pane there, it can. So that's really great. And you couldn't do that before, and now you can. And we're really just ticking off all of the most hotly requested features. So I'm very, very excited to show that one off tonight. So persisted user settings, a change that you might not have even noticed, but just an absolute quality of life upgrade for editors. That is when you have desk lists like these and you're able to sort them and set these settings. These settings are actually saved server-side now, so that if you refresh the browser, you log in from a different computer, those settings will actually be retained. Where it used to be, I think that was written to local storage, so perhaps only that browser would save those settings. Now those are saved to our servers, and that opens up the gateway for us to save a lot more user per author and make sure the studio is much more configured to that person. Type Gem, this is probably the biggest, one of the biggest headline features launched in the last few months, and definitely among the most popular feature requests. This GitHub issue going back to 2020. There's been a lot of community efforts around this, and efforts even by our own engineers. And so there's been some amount of tooling out there for quite a while, but we needed to have something. And so we sort of we looked at those as early work, and certainly our work builds on the shoulders of those. But the solution had to be twofold for us to be really happy with it. And that was, one, to be able to generate types from schema and types from queries. Because again, the content that comes from Content Lake can be different to the content in your Sanity Studio, because maybe your Grok query reshapes the content. So to be able to generate types from schema was to be able to extract the schema down to a JSON representation and then be able to generate types off of that schema. So now when you are creating schema like you always have, you extract that out to a JSON file, which then you can generate these types off of it. So this really solves one side of the equation, which was really, really useful to have types based on your schema. But the part that I know personally I was really excited about was the types from Grok queries, because this is really the power of that platform. And that was brought up in one of the talks tonight as well. As it's one thing to be able to structure content in one way in the studio when you're authoring it, but to be able to reshape that into whatever application is going to consume that content. That's the real power of Grok. And so that we can generate types from Grok queries that just do anything with your content is really excellent as well. So you do need to make sure that you're prefixing your Grok queries with the Grok template literal, like is being shown at the top there, and it will generate these types. With the type gen generate, it does mean that you do need to keep running that generation script every time you change your schema or generate or change your queries, but at least you do get up-to-date types. And with that configuration down the bottom there, it does mean that if you've got your studio and your front end in different repositories, different folders, sorry, it means that you can sort of read from one source and export to another. So really excited to land that one. And I know that was hotly requested, and a huge quality of life upgraded for developers. Tasks shipped in April. So this was in beta, I believe, but sort of a fast follow-up to comments was the ability to assign tasks to people. So this has both the benefit of having authors work together in the studio, not having to work outside in some other application and then bring their work into the studio, but also it can block publishing. So a task needs to be complete in order to be published. So just really great to bring that stuff into the studio instead of having to do your project management over here and your content editing over there. You can do it all in the one place. We launched enhanced search on April 16, which actually was disabled shortly after, but it probably will come back. But it's going to be a server-side search of your Sanity content. It ought to be much more powerful than just the client-side search, so something perhaps to look forward to in the future. We have presence cursors in portable text, which also came out as well. So you've got multiple authors. Sanity's always been multiplayer. I know multiplayer is the new hotness, but Sanity's kind of just always been there, always like that. And but now we have this in the portable text editor as well. So you can see cursors inside of portable text and see which author is where in the document. Comments and tasks came out of beta as well in that release, so they're considered stable. Scheduled publishing is now part of the core studio package. So this used to be a plugin, but we consider it valuable enough that it sort of needs to be inside of every studio. So you'll always see this. You can now save query results from Vision out to CSV files and JSON. This was brought up by one of our engineers in a recent online meetup that we had. So you've got these little save buttons down here on the right-hand side, and so you can export those queries out really quickly, which is excellent. Another one of those things that you might not have missed and maybe may never need, but if you have a custom component inside the structure builder, it can now handle intent links, which if you've ever needed that, that's so thrilling. But if you haven't, then terrific. Keep living your best life. But yeah, you can drop any custom component. So that structure builder thing, you don't have to show our document editor there. You can just drop any React component in you like. But this now allows you to make sure a link from somewhere else in the studio will respect and find that component. So that is actually really, really cool. We now sync back to Shopify meta objects. So the Sanity Shopify Connect application has been around for a while, but we continue to work on that as well. It's probably the simplest integration we have from Sanity to something is to be able to get product data from Shopify into Sanity, but now we're writing content back as well into meta objects. Some people want all that content in Sanity. Some people want all that Sanity content in Shopify. We are doing much better to support both use cases now, and that Connect app keeps getting better and better. The Actions API launched only recently as well. This is it's a high-level alternative, it says on the Mutations API. So a lot of what the studio does in document actions, so create, duplicate, creating a new draft when you start typing in a published document, a lot of that was just studio client-side logic. The Content Lake didn't actually know what it meant to create a draft for a published document. That was something that just happened in the studio. Now all of that happens server-side. Probably the biggest pain point, I know personally for me, if you've ever used Sanity Client to patch documents and you've wanted that logic of, I want to patch the draft if it exists, otherwise create a new draft from the published version, that's usually required a lot of logic that you've had to do yourself. You have to query the document first, find out if there's a draft. If there's not, you have to create one from the published document and set a new revision and do all of that. But now we have Actions to be able to do that and much more. So everything you saw in document Actions, a lot of the logic that you saw in the studio, that's all now done server side. So this opens the gateway to build even more complex applications outside of the studio that do studio-like things with your content. So that's a really quick recap of most of the big feature releases in the last 6 months. Some of the things that you've seen there, though, require the growth plan, so the comments and tasks. And but if you ever need to try that, you can spin up a brand new project immediately, and you do get this upgrade to be able to try out all those features. So if you are trying to put this in front of somebody, this has been a difficult thing in the past. You're sort of just describing to them some of our marketing points. But now you can actually show these things because a brand new account will get a 30-day trial of all of those features. So you will actually get to try tasks and comments and all of the best features when you start a new project. And spinning up a new project is free and instant from the command line. So spin up as many projects as you like to try those things out. Sanity Learn is also something that got launched as well. And this is where I've been spending my time recently. I know I've spoken to some of you already about the learning platform. This is a Remix application that we've got running now in production. It is where you can go and have your hand held through the journey of start to finish, say, setting up a new front end, trying out the schema migration tools, trying out TypeScript, learning more about structured content, putting a team together. There's sort of some conceptual project manager style things in there. There's some very developer oriented things there. And it's also the path towards developer certification, which will be launched for all developers later this year, but we're working with agency partners first to get certifications done. The certification exam is complete, and we will be in touch soon. And with a few people to reach out first, but we want to start seeing some Sanity certified developer badges on your LinkedIn profiles very soon. Sanity Create also launched quite recently. So this is a whole new app. This is our first other app that we've launched, and it's a distraction-free writing environment that is made better with AI. So this is an example of some of the things that you can do. And as you can see, it's a much cleaner experience. It is built on Studio technology, but it is not the Sanity Studio. Anybody can just start a new Create project inside of the application. So you get those sorts of usual text editing features that you'd expect, sort of much cleaner than writing in the Studio. But we also get this ghostwriter thing off to the side here. I've got more of the text formatting features being shown here. But you can see the little icon off to the side. I'm not sure if it happens in this, maybe the next one. Are there not? Is there not videos of the AI actually working in this?
Who cares about AI?
Okay, who cares about AI? It is really quite amazing. Let's just go back here. So the big difference it does is you can set up these notes that allow you to set context for the writing that you're authoring. So it's not just using all of Anthropic's models and understanding, but you can give it your own context, your own understanding, what's important to you, and then it will help you finish sentences. It will help you write things out. I mean, the Sanity developer certification process was assisted with AI there to help us sort of write out what was that going to look like, what was the program going to look like, and it does really ease the editing process and still write something that's very unique to what you are trying to do. The next set of slides are really important, things that are now true, particularly for people who've used Sanity for quite some time. It sometimes surprises me having conversations with people who've used Sanity for a while, and perhaps you tried something once and that's how it worked, and that's how it's always going to be. And I know I'm like that. You try a new software tool, and if it didn't work right the first time, you sort of walk away and years later still believe that that's how it is. But I just wanted to debunk some myths about perhaps the things that are no longer true and things that are now true. Visual editing is available on all plans. When it launched, it was enterprise only, and when it launched, it was only on Vercel enterprise only, and so Vercel still have some documentation here. But you can do visual editing on anything that you like. The only difference on Vercel is that they will add overlays to your preview builds, and you get sort of their editing widget thing. But really, this editing experience here, you can do that on any front end, and you can deploy that anywhere. And if you've got like a dynamic server-rendered app, you can put it into an editing mode just like this and have that click to edit, which is really excellent. Visual editing is simpler to set up. This has been an ongoing effort by our developer team, and certainly with our educational efforts to try and make clear how much simpler this is. It did used to require many different things all to be set up in a row. You do only have to set up the server-side loader, and you can put something in your front end to sort of do the refreshing for you. If you want it faster and better, you can also add this client-side loader, and it will give sort of sub-second updates inside of the presentation tool. But yes, there's less dependencies, less requirements to get that started, but we still have really fast, really excellent live preview if you want it. Presentation is now the best place for live preview, and my heart sank a bit earlier when I saw Arm had the iframe pane. This is how previews always have been shown, and I'm not saying you can't do that anymore, and iframe pane is still fine, so I really should have deleted this next slide. So I'm really sorry. I feel really, it's having a nap. like a remix again. Yes, so I mean, it's not entirely dead. RAP might be over the top, but it is better to put it into presentation, and we still have built a bridge between documents being edited and the presentation tool. So when you use that locations API, you get links at the top of your document there that will take you to the presentation tool. And then you have this icon at the top right here that will take you back to the document. So even though you are hopping out of that document editing flow, you still can navigate between those two documents. So yes, while the iframe pane still does work, and sadly, I should have retired on the iframe pane. I think it's my most popular NPM package of all time, is literally shipping an iframe inside of a React component that took a URL as a prop. But I think it's my greatest contribution to open source, as it is still. And now we've killed it. So thanks. You don't need to filter drafts out of queries. Again, if you've been using Sanity for a while, you probably wrote queries like this. If you had an authentication token in your client, then it would return draft documents, and so you had to add that to your query. You don't have to do that anymore since we've launched Perspectives. Perspectives will filter drafts in or out of your queries as well. So you can protect your draft documents with a published perspective, but you can also make sure that drafts overlay your published documents when you want it to with this perspective, and that's set on the client. So just a few things that are no longer true. The live content API. This is something we've shipped recently, and this is among the more exciting things I've seen as shipped recently. And I feel like if you think you've got feature requests at Sanity, you should see our internal Slack. I think I've got you all covered. And this is yet something that I never really thought that I wanted. But we've had live preview for draft content, and we've had listeners to be able to sort of listen with the API to changes as they come in. But what the live content API does is it gives you a way to add a small amount of client-side JavaScript and listen to changes on the query. And what this allows you to do is actually pull live, up-to-date content, not from the API, but from the CDN. So your client-side application can be made aware there has been a change made to this published document because it's tracking the query and the params that you're using. And when those changes occur, it sends you some tags. You just send a request back to the server and say, run that query again from the CDN, but use this tag, and it will give you live, up-to-date content. And so it's far better than the previewing content, the draft content preview, because that requires authentication. It's far better than the listeners because that hits the API. This is live, almost real-time updates from the CDN, and it's entirely secure. It doesn't require authentication. And so it's actually used on the Sanity Learn app. If you complete a task in one browser, it will update another browser, even though the query for your progress is a private query being run server-side, because the client can be made aware this query and parameters has been updated. And there's a demo here that Canute made. This is in a Next.js application, but again, this can work in anything. But this is the experience that you weren't able to do easily before. You sort of have to hit the API to get this fresh data, or you would have to sort of wait a few seconds for the CDN to update. Now you can do things like a live blog or sports scores or anything like that, hit publish, and now the website is updated with that content. And again, for the fifth time, it's coming from the CDN, not the API. And I think that's really cool. It unlocks a whole new bunch of possibilities when perhaps you'd use Firebase or something like that to do that instead, and you'd have to have your data somewhere else. Now you can do that from right inside of Sanity. Don't tell anyone, especially those listening on the internet. We're streaming this online and telling anybody not to share it. But hey, this is what we're also working on. A lot of people have made their own custom blocks for the selector of the array items. I think this might have shipped today. This shipped today. So this is not under construction. This is out there. So the add item dropdown is now searchable. It has tabs. It has custom preview components. We know you love building page builders, so let's just lean into it. Another hugely requested feature, the ability to copy and paste blocks between documents as well. This is one of those things that I think every Sanity engineer has a proof of concept laying around on a branch somewhere, and it's just never got together to ship it into the product. Well, we're going to ship that into the product most likely sometime soon. Another pet project that I think we've all got a version of, and certainly I did a demo of this 3 years ago, which partly got me my job at Sanity, was bulk editing view. I think they'll get any views known as the Widowmaker internally, because everybody's had a go, and then you just reach that spot where no, it's just too difficult. But this is actually under active development, which is really, really exciting as well, to be able to make bulk edits and to be able to see things in a table view. And we have one more on the array selector. What even is this one? Oh yeah, this is that nested item view. So instead of having to drill down through modals, which you modal, and have to click all the way down, what if you could just navigate your entire array of objects in a tree view like this? This is going to make getting through those complex arrays of objects and page builders much simpler to do as well. So that is also under active development with our design and engineering teams as well. And one more thing that isn't visually very interesting, but it's just a command here, Sanity build auto updates. So what about shipping a studio that pulls in its own updates and keeps itself up to date? Because we are shipping, we are cooking at the moment. So a studio that doesn't require you to redeploy and run NPM upgrade, that would be a great benefit as well. So auto updating studios under active development. The next one might need some discerning. We've got some grok here, but it is the top line of the grok that we need to pay attention to. You've always been able to run functions in your queries, but you've not been able to define functions before. So this sort of brings a whole new level of complexity to your grok queries and options that you've not had before. You don't have to wait for us to ship new functions if you just want to write your own. So user-defined functions in grok queries is also being actively worked on as well. Just don't tell anyone you heard it from us. And why is it useful? To be able to... Are you asking me?
Yes.
You have a ready-made answer for this?
I have an answer for this.
Can you tell me why it's useful? I can make up something, but then I feel like I'm a sales call.
Then you realized it could be just functions.
Yeah, that's true. So the initial draft of this just looked like fragments, like you might be used to with GraphQL. And but at some point we realized that actually being able to write your own functions to do what you like inside of that, instead of just writing small individual queries and then sprinkling those queries through that, if instead you could do something much more dynamic. And so this allows you to resolve a block any way that you want and sort of run much more logic in there as well. It's a very simplified example, but you might be able to already imagine the more complex handling you could do of things, say accepting if the type is this, then resolve it like that. I know those things are very useful for things like resolving links, resolving internal links to be able to give a different slug structure based on the type of the reference. So yeah, all sorts of use cases for that once that ships, and very exciting to see as well. And that is slide 94. That's slide 95. We're done. And that's it for proceedings. So I'm not sure if you had any more closing comments, but thanks again to our lovely hosts for tonight. This has been excellent. And thanks everybody for turning up as well. So massive turnout, and yeah, really cool to see everybody. And come and ask us questions afterwards. I'll hand over to Knut to finish.
I am amazed that like it's 2 minutes left. So like we ran a tight ship. Yeah, again, thanks to everyone who came. Thanks for everyone who watched the stream. Thanks for Alexander and Øyvind that came from Norway, from Represent, to be here to represent I guess.
Oh, thanks for explaining this.
Thank you very much for the speakers. We have some swag for you somewhere. Totally. I propose swag. There's some Sanity swag around, some coasters, some rock bomb. Yes, maybe some grok socks or something left. Stickers. Make sure to grab. We don't want to take swag home, basically. Still sushi, drinks. I don't know how. Like, when will you kick us out? We can do like a Berlin style party to 4 a.m. whenever. Okay, awesome. But yeah, feel free to stick around, talk to the speakers, interrogate them about how they did things. Talk to us. Yeah, have a good time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh.